The edition is today speaking with Minister of Climate Change, Environment and Energy, Ali Shareef. Thank you so much for giving us some time. So I just wanted to start off by asking you, since assuming office, have you identified any areas, either administratively or policy-wise, in your ministry that you believe needs improvement?
Yes, first of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity from the news to speak. I think this is something very important that you guys are doing, and I would really encourage even my fellow ministers to take this opportunity and inform the public about these opportunities. Yes. Well, I actually had a vested advantage when I joined, because I was in the ministry since 2009, and since 2001, and then even then, while I was the special envoy for climate change, I still had a very deep connection with the ministry and have been working very closely. So the exchange or this switch to be as the minister and joining in was a very smooth transition actually for me. I think that's how President even planned that as well. But there are certain things which I saw that need some improvement administratively, like you said. It's something which has been, I wouldn't say it was there for just 2 or 3 days after I joined. It has been there for quite some time, I think. It's more like we have had a kind of working environment. I would say it's a bit relaxed. It's not that because the staff wanted to be relaxed, but sometimes I found that one might send a letter to another ministry or another company or wherever, and then doing the follow-ups has been something which I really even the day one when I walked in with all the senior staffs, that's something I asked them to make sure that yes, that's not a culture even within the Ministry of Environment. That is even in general the country as a whole. Even in our daily lives, if you call up any place, even if it is a government authority or even if it is a private sector, the reply that you'll get is, I'll check and call back. But that call, yes, sometimes you do get that, but sometimes, most of the time, you don't get that. I mean, I have experienced this very personally. So I said, rather than that, we need to be a little bit more proactive. So that's something which I have been, asking, and even day by day, I have been trying to get that kind of working environment to be established. Other than that, I think, some of the policy calls which were waiting to be made, like I said, since I have been in that, if I were the minister, then I would have made that call that day. So, like I said, that made a very smooth transition, and there were that kind of calls which I did make to make things, start flowing through. So there were some policy calls, yes, which I made from the day one, and there are some administrative changes which I have been talking with the permanent secretary and the senior staff to make the work going a bit faster.
And are your areas of focus as when you were a climate envoy and now as minister, do they remain the same?
Well, there was a very specific mandate to the climate change envoy written in the Climate Change Act, which is very much confined within the climate change area. But as a minister, my portfolio becomes much more larger, which I have to cover the climate change, energy, waste, water, and then plus the meteorology, and I would have to cover the Utility Regulatory Authority and the ERA as well. So compared to being the climate change envoy, that was just a part of the current portfolio, but it's much more wider now.
So I was looking back at the work the Environment Ministry has been doing in recent months, and I came across that in April, the Maldives joined an international conference on moving away from fossil. So I wanted to ask, What are the Maldives' goals in this area?
The thing is, of course, phasing out from the fossil fuel is something, yes, we would want to see as well, as especially as a small island country, because fossil fuel is the whole culprit of global warming and, getting the associated sea level rise and other impacts as well. So, which is something which we have been advocating to bringing down the temperature to 1.5 when we were in the AOCs, when we were running up to the Paris Agreement as well. So, but then again, we would have to understand as a small island country and who is, entirely depending on fossil fuel import for our daily lives. Even, indirectly you could say the water that we drink, even that is powered by fossil fuel at the moment. So even to that level, we are so much attached and depending on the fossil fuel. So our main goal at that meeting was, yes, there might be, bigger and larger and able countries who could afford to go, 60, 70, 80% on their energy production, which they are blessed with, other technologies and heaps of land to, put these solar panels and all these technologies. But we are a very small island and we are depending on this. So our goal is not to stop, to go into the phasing out of fossil fuel, but our goal is to say that, no, yes, we are also here. That transition has to be given in such a way that, the necessary technology and resources have to be given us before this phase out happens. So unless, this voice is made out, those bigger boys out there, they would, barely think of small island countries like us. So, which the main interest was to put that message across.
And even in the case of Maldives, even being small, we have also been doing a lot of work to promote renewable energy in the country. So I wanted to ask, what are the short-term goals in relation to renewable energy? Because we are struggling with rising fuel prices and, difficulty in availability with the current world situation. So what would be our short-term goals?
I think the shortest term goal was given by President in 2024, that, he would want to see the country going 33% of the electricity production coming from renewable energy sources. And he didn't say which source. Even if it is solar, even if it is ocean tech, even wind, whatever technology, the 33% has to be coming from that. And for that, I think we are working on that. We've got, programs like Mage Home program, Mage Home Solar program is already in place and people are using it, and we are expanding on that as well. And there are other solar installation programs in with the assistance of World Bank and ADB, and even the private sector is also coming in. Like there are many private sector investments coming through China as well, who wants to do solar PV installations, whether that be land-based or whether that be floating solar PV as well. So mostly, since we've got plenty of sun, and that's the most proven technology at the moment, I think, which is why, a lot of people is investing in solar, and specifically even the resorts. I think they have been seeing the benefit of putting in the solar, because for them the power production, the fuel price which they get is a bit higher compared to what the public gets because of the subsidy the public gets. But even I think it was not this month, I think it was last month or maybe this month, there was the biggest float in solar power, in fact, which was by one of the resorts. And I was looking at the statistics the other day, and I saw that the amount of solar PV installations done by the private sector is in fact more than what the public sector is doing. So, this is not a competition, but it's still good, because end of the day, even that's the public or the private, it's the Maldives government who purchases the oil into the country. So yes, the short-term goal is that, and we are having more programs on that.
And it's looking achievable.
It is looking achievable, and even recently we opened up 100 megawatt floating solar PV, and that is also coming through as a special economic zone project, which is actually opening the door for more private sector investments coming in. And looking at the numbers in the one in the current pipeline, if we go through that, I think that 33% is achievable.
Okay. So moving on to another area of your mandate. Research shows that about 41 inhabited islands still are lacking, fully established storage facilities. So I wanted to ask, how does the government plan to address this?
Yes, we have got that programmed into the national project, the budget project as well. And those projects, the storage projects, are actually installed by the Ministry of Housing and Construction, and we are working closely with them to expedite and do as many islands. And I think the target there for them is by end of next year to have these islands to be covered, and that's in the program.
And another issue affecting island communities in the Maldives is global warming driven sea level rise. It's adding salinity to the groundwater and threatening the freshwater lens. So this happens at a time when many islands still depend on groundwater for daily use, like for washing and things. So what does the government plan to do to ensure access to safe water, perhaps like how the MWSC does with piped desalinated supply?
Yes, even in addition to storage networks, that's the other infrastructure where the government is bringing into the islands.
So both of the projects
both
are
of
going
the projects,
together.
yes, because unless we provide the pipe desalinated network, then it would be very difficult for the population, like you said, the groundwater, yes, is getting saline and is also getting contaminated because there are no proper storage systems.
Yeah.
So that has to go hand in hand, and yes, even that's within the pipeline to install. But the thing is, specifically at this juncture, I think the whole world is throttled because of this Middle Eastern crisis, and so we are having difficulty in getting the ample amount of material, and the cost is also a bit skyrocketed at these days compared to what were initially budgeted. So there are difficulties in that perspective, but still it's in the pipeline and it's going on.
And so we've been talking about salinity and erosion and all the issues that the islands are facing.
Yeah.
So what are the key things that the government is doing in mitigation and resilience?
Actually, to increase the resilience and to mitigate, those are the interventions that we are putting in. I mean, talking about resilience, increasing the resiliency would be to find, to elevate the status of the people so that they could survive. So like you said, erosion and salinization of the water table would be addressed through these kind of interventions unless we put in the sewerage systems and the coastal protection. So those are actually there. Even for coastal protection, even for new reclamation, it comes with the shore protection. And for the islands who report the erosion, we do put coastal protection measures as well.
One of the things that maybe on social media, out in the public, something we are hearing a lot about right now is the construction of apartment buildings at the Vilimale Funavaa area. And lots of NGOs have flagged how this could harm the environment, and they bring up very valid concerns. But at the same time, housing is a similarly pressing issue, and a lot of people are looking forward to housing, especially in the Greater Male area. So, what do you think is the most appropriate way to find a balance here?
That's a very good question. I mean, my perspective is, yes, these two are very pressing issues. Our environment is also very pristine, Plus, we need the socio-economic development as well. So the thing is, like you said, it's about creating a balance between these two. Either you want the social housing, or you want a proper housing for yourself and the next generation that is coming after you, or is it just the pristine environment as it is that you want? I don't think we are going to get both here at the same time. No way. I don't think anywhere in the world that's a philosophy. I mean, look at say start from the industrial era, for example. The amount of development which they have brought. I mean, even now when we talk about the development, we always speak about Singapore and Europe and but if you look at the reality of how much environmental compromise they have done to get that infrastructure and development, that's enormous. That's enormous. That's what we are putting. I mean, that's what we are saying now. The kind of development which you have brought, the way, the scale, or the, I would say, I wouldn't say unethical, but those regulations and these regulations and laws which we have today wasn't there before. But the kind of development, should we do it the way they do it, then that would be very, very devastating. But that's the compromise which they did. Why? To get that infrastructure to be in place and to thrive with the social and economic life. That's the whole point of this. I'm not saying that sort of destruction has to be done today. No, there are other means, and even the technology has ripened so much that we could, of course, do that. But here, like you said, even in that particular case, I could say, yes, with that, so much social pressure and everything, I think now the government has decided to move the place to somewhere else. But then again, I think it's a matter of time, I would say. Yes, that tree is going to give a lot of, in some people's perspective, a lot of benefit. In some people's perspective, it's becoming a nuisance. But okay, now that has been moved, I could say, it might be a matter of time where that piece of land gets full and somebody else in this seat might be saying, no, this is the time that tree has to be replanted or removed to somewhere else and build the flat. So that call has to be made. So what I'm saying is, right now, yes, the space was there, fortunately, to do that move and keep the tree and get what we are trying to do. But that might not be the case always. I mean, in the very small islands that we have, that might not be the case always. So sometimes we might have to sacrifice the environment to get. Environment doesn't mean here. I think that's the confusion here for some people. Environment doesn't mean just only one sphere. In an environment, when you mean the environment, biological environment is there, physical environment is there, socio environment is there, economic environment is there, the atmospheric environment. Environment in the sense, it's a very broad thing. It's not just the living organisms or the physical environment there. No, you have to consider the whole spectrum of the environment. And then when you weigh and do it, okay, what's the most balance that you want to strike, or what's the most dire need that you want to address while you sacrifice the other thing, and how much and what's the level of sacrifice that you could do in order to get the socio-economic benefit. That's the balance we are talking about. So environment, I don't think here it's just of the biological and physical environment here. There are many spheres within the environment where you would have to think, okay, this is the most priority that we are going to give, while I'm going to sacrifice 10 from 100 on the other side. So that's the balance we are thinking about. What we would have to think about when we talk about this.
So another, again, pressing concern that people have been talking about is the oncoming coral bleaching threat. And some NGOs have called on the government to pause dredging and land reclamation as a preventive measure until the conditions stabilize. What's the government's stance on this?
Yes, I was actually reading through, lately, yes, there are evidence building up that, an El Nino is on the way. And there are some assessments which saying that this El Nino might be a stronger one. they have quoted this as this might be a super El Nino even. So it is still in the phases of ripening. The temperature, going towards the eastern coast is still rising up. So if that is the case, yes, our coral reef is going to be hit with some bleaching, of course, yes. And what we have found so far is that our reefs have been quite resilient actually, even with the recovery process from the El Nino events in previous times. And there have been times, some of the measures have been taken. I think it was year before last year. Some reclamation was put on hold due to the El Nino impacts, the warming waters. Should that be the case, again, I will of course advise on this. And then again, see, this is the issue which comes into these complexities, because these are very large investments which we are doing. Putting on hold, if that is something which we can afford to, because those dredgers deployed and putting them on an idle, even one day idle is like many thousands of dollars which they charge per day. So at the cost of what would be the cost and benefit of these things, which we would weigh, and we could put some measures in to reduce the stress that it will have on the marine environment.
Recently there was a different kind of incident. A tourist was attacked by a shark. It was a very serious attack leading to an amputation. So there's been talk in the public that incidents of shark attacks are on the rise because of unregulated shark feeding. What do you think? Could this be the reasons behind it, and how can it be addressed?
Well, yeah, that's a topic of discussion even within our ministry, even though shark protection and banning is mostly done through the fisheries ministry, but a lot of time of course it comes towards our ministry. Well, some of the researches which has been done in Maldives, according to that, the shark attacks are mostly due to the feeding habits. So I think there has to be some awareness campaign which needs to go out, how to properly do the encountering of the sharks. So I think that needs to be worked with the Ministry of Environment, the tourism industry as well, because that's where most of the these incidences do happen. So even with the dive houses, I think even they needs to be a bit more aware and careful about approaching this and how the particular divers approach to these animals. And I think that through a lot of awareness building only this could be these incidents could be reduced. So because so far, I mean, shark encountering is something very common done, not even in Maldives, elsewhere as well. But yeah, if it is done in the proper manner, probably that's how we should.
So a community effort is needed for this, right? Okay. So talking about the community, do you believe there's adequate awareness amongst the public on environmental issues, and how can we bring meaningful changes to our way of life to contribute towards building climate resilient communities?
I think there are quite a lot of awareness among the public. But like I said before, that awareness, if that gets skewed towards, the view and the thinking, if that gets skewed towards only one aspect of the environment and resilience building, I don't think that would be the healthiest way of, thinking. Because the way you think, it has to be, the thought process has to be inclusive of everything. So usually, like I said, when you talk to many people about the environment, from the many interviews which I have done with the public, the very first thing which comes to their mind is about, protection and mangroves and, so from that what I sense was, yes, they do have some kind of awareness, yes, but then again they have to have an understanding of, the environment is not only, confined to these. There are many other elements, because these are very connected systems.